1700. Fernando, what's time in Peru now?
It's 9:52 a.m.
Wow.
Oh, sorry, no, it's not 52.
Already
it's 10 a.m.
10 a.m. sharply.
Yeah.
So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for coming. Thank you very much for finding time and possibility to join our credit chats. And today we will chat with my colleague, with my friend. I allow myself to say Fernando Dyer from AENZA company, which is publicly listed company. And today we are chatting about compliance. Fernando stays in this profession for surely for more than 10 years. And he is leading real risk management and compliance in quite big and what is mostly important to our subject, publicly listed company. Fernando, may I ask you to begin with to define how do you present it, how do you see yourself in terms of profession, in terms of what you do generally in life?
Yeah, well, thank you very much for the invitation, Andre. Good afternoon to everybody. Good morning from Peru, from Latin America. And just to define myself, I mean, I am, I would say, a world citizen. My career started with auditing an extinct company, Arthur Andersen. I did it 35 years ago, probably, yes. And then moved to Europe and work in companies, in multinationals like DHL International, working at the world headquarters, developing the audit, the worldwide audit function, and then looking into business finance. Everything they had to do at the time with the revolution of how to optimize cash in companies, and then moved into controllership for a big reorganization of DHL in terms of IT development worldwide. That brought me finally, after 3 countries, into Switzerland. And after that superb experience with DHL, where at the time it was red and white, not yellow and red as today, before being purchased by Deutsche Post. And then moving to Japan Tobacco, where Andre and we met and worked together for quite a few years. And there developed the areas of corporate governance, internal controls, and moving to compliance. I was a worldwide corporate director on compliance, developing most of the programs that we had. Finally left JTI, and as a consultant was collaborating with the Ford Tobacco, Imperial Tobacco, in order to improve as well corporate governance, compliance portion as well, and then collaborated for about 3 years with the HSBC Bank worldwide, including teams that were led by the presidents of the bank in Russia, in France, in Luxembourg, in Germany, in the Middle East as well. I mean, in Qatar, in Oman, in Dubai, but also in Latin America, together with the teams in Mexico. And in parallel was collaborating with the World Economic Forum in terms of their anti-corruption program and other international organizations. And that's part of the world citizenship. But what is the common denominator is that dealt with risks. I mean, highlighting risks around the different businesses I've been able to collaborate with in more than 40 countries, and realizing or confirming that pretty much the risks are the same. The response is not necessarily similar, and it depends on the maturity of those countries or those companies in the area of business. And that's what makes the difference. And I believe that forums like this one, where you can share the future that has not happened to you yet, in order to put preventative measures, it does help. And thank you very much then for this opportunity.
Always a pleasure. Mucho gusto. Fernando, thank you very much for mentioning future risks, because I strongly believe, as well as you are, that when we manage risks, a lot of things happening about risks, and we may look at business in general as a risk management. And too many risks, if we look at majority of them, could be either prevented or simply taken as it is, because when they already happen, there is nothing to prevent. Very often there is nothing to deal with, or nothing to do in the end. Very, very, very often this happens in case of credit risk. And today we are speaking, as we discussed before, somewhere on the edge of credit risk and compliance risk. And we started, and as I said, first of all, let me share with you and with everybody a big surprise I had on LinkedIn. I've started a survey, a poll, where I just ask a simple question: which risk should prevail, credit or compliance? To me, personally, as a practitioner, everything starts with in hierarchy, everything starts with the risk of fraud. We either deal with the real company or we deal with the fake company. That's first question. Then second is compliance. It is either ethical or, I would say, not too risky to deal with the company or not. And only after that, we think about granting or not granting credit to that, because we expose ourselves dealing with the company even without granting credit. But which means we're supposed to know who we deal with. And if we try to define in relation to third-party cooperation, how can we define the compliance risk in very general terms? So what does that mean, compliance risk? Not to make that a secret.
Okay, let's go for the first question then. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you mentioned what would be my choice. I mean, I would say cancer or AIDS. Which risk?
Well,
wow.
I don't believe it is like this. I don't believe it is like this. But if we already have
a bit.
Yeah, please.
Let me develop a bit of this. I mean, those risks, you never want to have them in real. Yes. But if you want to choose your battles, mm-hmm. if you are in a catch situation where you don't have an escape, okay. I will definitely be more careful about the compliance risk. Why? Yes. Because when I measure or when I start to evaluate the credit risk, I have a defined amount of concern. I have an exposure that mm-hmm. can be delimited in a frame. When I go to the compliance risk, yes, you say, yeah, I don't comply with a regulation, with a law. And that is the first part of the equation. Mm-hmm. You can have a measure of how much penalty you will have by not complying with that law. But you don't necessarily manage or are able to calculate what is the second part of the equation, which is yes. the reputational effect of that failure in terms of the compliance with the regulation. And that is what actually makes me taking better the risk of the credit than the risk of the compliance. If I make it probably quite simple in terms of comparing When in my business, we sign an agreement with a business partner. My company is in engineering and construction, and we sign together with Odebrecht, which has been one of the has been the biggest corruption scandal in Latin America, and actually reach as well Africa in their illicit acts. And my company, before I joined the company, they signed contracts with them. And finally, last week, we signed finally with the local authorities a plea agreement that finally put a figure on the damages and the provisions we have. Now, this is after 4.5 years of legal and reputational damage. The first moment that this came to the surface, so we signed a contract, say a credit contract, a business contract.
Well, whatever, business contract,
Oh, the business contract was for about a project of about $8 billion US development for the gas facilities in Peru. And it was signed in a moment where the shareholder, the owner of the business partner company, was already in jail for corruption.
Okay.
The company did not measure the risk. They did measure that the business is clean up front. The business has been obtained with legal means, but they did not measure that the shadow of the business partner ownership would tarnish the project. One of the conditions of the project was we had to close in a given moment the financing of the $7-8 billion contract with international community banks. And obviously, the international community banks were not willing to sign with that kind of majority shareholder in the business partnership.
So that's I listened to you and I asked myself, well, that's quite a big contract, but does it worth anything if there is no finance? That's what I say. But this is and at the same time, continuing your thought or echoing your thought. I understand that this is not the only problem, that bank does not give money. There are bigger problems.
No, but let's do what is on the positive side for the company. I mean, the company was going to double or triple their backlog in terms of contracts for the future. Was going to give stability for going into the major leagues in terms of business development in the region, in the country. So there was a lot of pluses, there was a lot of carrots on one side. And internally, we believe that management was saying, okay, fine. I mean, this guy, this majority shareholder is in disgrace. They will end up selling their shares for a cheap price. And here we are to buy. So we will come bigger on the partnership. It will be a win for us and so on, but didn't think or didn't measure that the vessel can swing to one side and sink. And did sink. And then all of a sudden the company has to pay the penalties for canceling the contract, more than $50 million from night to day, and then more than $400 million of repayment of the initial capital that the syndicate banks have provided to the company in order to buy their share on the partnership. And actually, you didn't have that cash in the bank. You had already invested that in pipes, in groundwork, and so on. So you had to sell your assets, your businesses, in order to face this crisis. But that was only the beginning of the crisis. for not looking, for not doing your due diligence on one side at the beginning,
yes,
and for not putting some clauses in your contracts related to corruption, related to the risks that you might be facing with those projects. In that sense, this first step of facing the cancellation of the contract by the government because you didn't arrive to the closure of the financing of the business, and then facing with the banks and repaying what they lent you, was the first step. The second step was that, the man was on jail. 3 months later,
just a man in jail, nothing else.
2 months later, the representatives of that company in Peru said, yes, we did committed crimes. We have done a deferred prosecution agreement in the US with the Department of Justice. And by the way, the partners of your company did know about the illicit payments we were doing. In that precise moment, next day, because this was at night, next day, the shares dropped 70%, 70, in New York, and in Lima.
Yes.
And all of a sudden, the company lost 70% of their capitalization value. That was not the only problem, the only next problem. The next problem was all the clients that, because the company does business to business contracts, and they started to shy away.
Absolutely.
And so on. So what I'm trying to explain to you is, if I make this parallel with a credit lending, I lost the credit at the beginning. But then where everything else is actually causing a tsunami of events, of crisis, that the company will face because didn't do their due diligence, didn't do what internally are the best practices in compliance in order to assess the risks, not only on the business portion of what is your core, engineering and construction, in my case, lending in your case,
not completely lending,
and then when you were dragged into this disgrace that for us meant that we went from crisis to crisis. Actually, we're experts today in crisis management, and we have in parallel developed the skills and the capabilities for risk assessments in parallel. And so I would prefer to take credit management risks, but not compliance risks.
Well, that's why I was asking that question, because to me, in 21st year of 21st century, which might seem risky to the majority of us, that's why I was actually surprised, because to me, everything starts, as I said in the beginning, everything starts with the risk of fraud, whether or not the company is not fake. Let's put it this way, and then compliance. And then only after compliance check, we're supposed to decide whether or not we're gonna be dealing with this or that company at all. And only afterwards, we may think about granting credit and consider credit risk. Because, you already covered our second question, because that's already drastic enough consequence of, sequence of events. But what I was, if I ask you, because you already got great example, we don't need to look for other. Was it really possible to prevent such a situation?
It was. It was possible because the point is, when you assess a business, compliance is one portion. Credit is another. Credit financing is another portion.
Yes.
I mean, the core of the part of the business is another portion. what you really try to assess as a whole is how suitable is that business for my company. And for assessing the suitability of the business, I need to look into the person. I need to look into the components of this business. And I need to look into myself, whether or not me as a company, I have the shoulders strong enough to carry this business.
Yes.
In other words, I will not jump into a pool of 3,000 meters long if I only have a breath for 300 meters.
Absolutely.
And also, if I have the breath for 300 meters, I will not join with a business partner or grant credit to someone who probably I have the risk to put on my shoulders on the top while I'm swimming. Because I will
absolutely,
drown.
absolutely.
So I need to measure all these situations up front while I am taking my decision, because then I will say I will accept the risk because I have the means. I will transfer the risk, I don't know, insurances, collaterals, whatever, or I will reject the risk because it's too high for me, it's outside my appetite.
Absolutely.
And therefore you could have prevented this. In other words, if you have a person in jail, that's already a big red flag. Why it is in jail for? Okay, it's because of corruption. You didn't ask, what are you doing? You didn't look into the legal risks of those acts. You didn't look into how that can impact your business because you are the little one. And on the other hand, if things go worse, what is the worst case scenario for your company?
That was my question about, actually. That's what I was asking about, whether or not, you know, in the discussion, the thing is, obviously, when we talk about risk management, in general, we understand that looking at only one part of a transaction, it's already stupidity. It's just as stupid as it could possibly be. If you look at whatever angle we take, either compliance, credit, or just finance. If we look only, if we would look only about sales side of the transaction without looking at expenses, we don't know whether or not the transaction would be profitable, and so on and so forth. The same story with the compliance, and that's by the way, you just drawn an example why I like it, because in the beginning I was saying whether negative consequences of a transaction could be worse than the whole amount of could be worse than the loss of a whole amount of a transaction, which is more or less happened to the company you explain. And but at the same time, looking back, obviously we all remember that, you know, everybody is smart in the end. But if we look back, it was still possible to prevent, to think, and what are the steps, you know, should have been taken to prevent that. Just look at transaction, you know, draw possible, you know, try to define possible scenarios, or maybe something else. Maybe
there is not necessarily rocket science behind that, and you just, I think, mentioned what is needed. I mean, different scenarios for the risks. I think the clever part or the difficult part here is to identify the risks. And for identifying the risk, you need to ask the good questions. And in order to ask the good questions, you need to know about the business, your customer, the one who is looking for the credit, in my case, the one who is looking for the partnership with me, is doing, and whether or not I understand that business in order to ask the good questions. And that goes back to suitability. I am suitable for this business. Is this customer or this customer is suitable for the business they are doing, and so on. Because then you, with the questions you ask, you will unveil alerts that can just be okay, or alerts that can highlight risks that you need to analyze. But this is just one portion of the risk management. I mean, this is when you are in front of a business of a business decision. But there are other elements of the risk management which are with the process of doing business. Yeah. And this has to do with the transactions, the processes, the inherent risk of certain activities, the control risks that you can put in place, and then the residual risks that are left over, whether or not this fits into your appetite, and so on. So there are two dimensions that come together in order to manage this risk. The traditional one that everybody knows is the one we're talking about. You face a decision, you face a business, where can things go wrong, and so on. But there are methodologies to go and analyze the animal before saying, I like this animal, I like this business, I like this subject, to go ahead. But that has to do with your expertise in that business. In other words, say, if I'm going to specialize on credit for mining companies, I need to understand the mining business. That's not news for you. And the same, if I'm going for gas pipelines or dams or electrical transmission lines and so on, I need to know about those businesses, because then I am suitable for asking the questions. And likewise, the other side, I don't need to have a brand new student as a customer in order to identify risks when they are asking credits facilities for a $120 million transmission electrical lines. Hey guy, what do you know about this business? Who are you? Who do you represent? I remember in those sessions I was doing in Europe, that one manager, senior manager for one of the banks, come with an anecdote, and he was telling us, look, we were invited by a customer who wanted to invest a large amount of millions of dollars in our bank, and we were invited in a very fancy restaurant in Switzerland. And I bring a junior manager with me in order to have a sort of a training on the job for this guy. So when the meeting starts, the guy starts to talk in Arabic, and the senior manager knew Arabic. That's why he was contacted. And then they switched to English, Arabic, and so on. And then at the given moment, the senior manager tells the guy, the junior manager, could you please excuse us? I will see you at the office. So the guy left, and the other one, the senior guy, comes and asks, man, who you represent? Who are you representing here? And then the guy took one business card from one of the most known banks in Switzerland and put it on the table, and put another business card from another very well-known bank in Switzerland on the table as well, and told the guy, look, I am representing Saddam Hussein, and I have spoken to this guy and to this other guy in these two banks, but I want your bank. What do you say in front of this? What would be your reaction? Because your life is at stake as well with these kinds of encounters. What do you do?
Well, you're asking me. I don't know. Honestly speaking, I don't know, but yeah, obviously, if we talk
But
about, I mean, if we talk as drastic as drastic situation as Saddam Hussein or names like this, my reaction would be as simple as clear. I mean, let me pay the bill. Thank you very much for your time.
Okay, there are two elements here that I want to highlight. First,
yes,
the senior manager was doing his risk assessment while talking in the restaurant with the guy.
absolutely.
And he smelled. He was screening the guy.
Absolutely.
What is this? This is too good to be true, probably. And then identify these risks and put the question forward in a very blunt way. Then he gets information. What do you do with this information?
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you take the risk? Do you transfer the risk? Or you say no?
That's...
And how do you do that in order to preserve your integrity and the bank?
Yeah.
And at that point, what the guy says, okay, let me contact you back. I will bring your proposal to the senior people in the bank, and we will come back. He didn't confront.
He didn't say, yeah, he didn't confront, he didn't say yes, he didn't say no. But the thing is, with such a drastic situation, he is not allowed to say yes or no. That's the thing. He doesn't have an authority.
You could say no immediately, yeah, but you need to protect yourself, your integrity. But the other thing that happens here is that what do you do with this information when you come? Because today is this guy, tomorrow is another guy, and other things. And how do you protect your entity as a next step? And you go through the process of compliance. And then you follow what is within the procedures in the policies of this entity, of this bank. There are many learnings in these small anecdotes that are important, but not only, I say, for credit risk management, for any business.
Absolutely. We are not about only credit risk. You know, we both can speak about credit risk. That's an interesting point. But you know, there is something a little bit bigger and quite more important. Before we do any business, we need to take care of compliance. That's my strong conviction. And again, the thing is, if we speak about, continue with this anecdote and with this exposure, with this everything, okay, we can speak about integrity, but there are two sides of the transaction. There is income side and there is a risk side. And here we need to take a decision. And I recently I was given an example which was given in his book by Edward Altman, since we need to mix two things, credit risk and compliance. And he says that, a quite old book, I read it, this the book which continuously laying on my table. And he says that signs of coming bankruptcy of Enron were seen 1 year before, but no one of creditors have withdrawn their facility. So everybody were thinking that, okay, maybe with some drastic events, but finally we will be okay in the end. But you know, that's what I'm trying. No, I
have two more examples as that.
But I just wanted to continue with that idea that compliance is not only about assessment. Compliance is not only about assessment of risk, because I just use that, to me, this is bright example, and many of people who are listening to us are working on the credit side. Credit risk is not a decision yet. Assessment of risk may be done very, very well. Or due diligence could be done very well, but then whether or not this due diligence and all the information collected led to the right decision, because assessment of risk and decision are two different things.
Yeah,
so if you can elaborate on that.
Your decision will be a picture you take at the time you sign.
Yes.
But then you need to monitor, you need to follow, you need to put the preventative measures in order to keep the continuum of the current situation, or get alerts that that continuum or that moment has changed into a dangerous zone for you. So you need to put your either your covenants or your clauses, protective clauses in your contract.
The contract.
But beyond the contract is to enact them on the time.
Yeah. May I ask you, these are we've discussed in the last little bit more than half an hour, we were speaking about preventive things. Yeah, so we do, we spoke about this interesting situations where we found or we've discovered that doing business with this or that counterpart may have a risk to our business, may have quite big risk. We already agreed that compliance may bring, I would say, unpredictable consequences, which will be unpredictably big negative consequences for our business. But what if we, doing or dealing in good faith, sign a contract with a normal company, we took reasonable care to do a compliance check, and we started to deal. We're not touching credit. We found that this company is not fake, and we found that this company, dealing with this specific company was, let's say, quite compliant. I'm already not asking question whether or not it is possible to be 100% compliant. That's only, it's always a probability. But let's say we are in good faith, sign a contract, and we continue to monitor. And somewhere in the middle of the contract, we discover that this company committed something which supposed to put a negative shadow on us as well. What should we do?
That's the normal day-to-day in the business, actually.
Yeah.
Because again, if I put that from the risk perspective,
yes,
I have different risks depending who is the third party. If the third party is an employee, the risk will be different to a supplier. It would be different to a business partner.
May I just define a bit? So we were talking about customers and suppliers. Let's not touch employees. Every business buys and sells. So let's speak about mostly B2B customers and suppliers.
If it is a supplier, I would normally rate my risk lower than if it is a customer for me.
Yes.
Because with a supplier, I have the power in my hand most of the times. With a customer, I cannot actually go to divorce in many cases. Now, depending in the industry you are.
Yes.
Because my partnership in my business is for about 2-3 years while we are building the facilities, being infrastructure, being an airport, being whatever it is.
Yes.
And so if my partner comes into disgrace, which did happen already twice in my customer, in this case, for me and you, when I talk about my partner, it could be well understood as customer. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's what I understand. Yes.
Yeah, because we have quite a lot of businesses we do in joint ventures.
Yes, but we were
And
talking
therefore-
about in building business, you are entering into transaction where everybody does their part.
Yeah.
So this more mainly partnership, but we understand that this is
Yeah.
mainly customer. Yeah.
In one of the businesses we have, one of the partners was in a conference in a Latin American country,
Yeah.
where the president of that country was present in that conference.
Mhm.
And the guy, he stood up and said, by the way, yes, we paid a bribe to Hugo Chavez in Venezuela because the guy expropriated one of our facilities, didn't want to pay. We were fighting injustice for over 5-6 years.
Mhm.
We didn't see the light at the end of the tunnel, so we made a facilitation payment, and surprise, surprise, we got paid. And he said that in front of the authorities in his country. And he was one of the business partners in a project we had. What do you do? What do you do?
What will I do? What will I do? I will take a phone, type you a message and said, Fernando, would you mind to come back to your consulting career? Because yeah, obviously I need to measure the consequences. So I need a specialist and I need to measure the consequences. So what are the consequences to me if I continue to deal with? And if I understand correctly, in your business, either just general customer and supplier who supplies goods or buys goods, it's kind of replaceable. Maybe
Exactly.
in a week, minute, two. In your case, this is the project, and you already up to here you are in this water, and
you cannot get away.
You cannot jump away,
No.
as simply as just because of that. And
you could though, if you would have clauses in your contract, if you would have had a crystal ball many years ago, and you could have put in your contract a clause that in case of disgrace, this kind of disgrace,
yes,
you have the right to buy the shares of this partner and so on.
Mhm.
And this is a reciprocal clause in the contract, either or.
Yes.
Then you have the exit for the problem.
Yeah, obviously you can buy shares, you can, but that's the thing, you're supposed to have that with every your partner.
No, you don't. You don't have necessary anti-corruption clauses in all contracts.
Yeah.
In the world.
Yeah, that's clear.
Okay, so that is, and why people will have these clauses, because they see the risk. If you don't see the risk, you don't think. You go for the typical legal contract.
Yes. That's, I mean, but
it depends on your assessment.
Depending on the assessment. So, and we are moving closer to our third question seamlessly. So, and this is the good moment to ask. So, how much is actually enough in terms of compliance risk?
You don't necessarily have a crystal ball.
I mean, I don't believe in crystal ball, honestly speaking. Yeah. We understand that, crystal ball may exist. We may believe it works, or we may think it works. Or maybe somebody would tell us, about crystal ball, but reliance on crystal ball is, I would say, this is the worst strategy the business possibly could have. But at the same time, we understand that there are signs.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there are signs which make us possibly exposed to such a risk. That's one side of the story. So, at the same time, could we assess? I mean, I don't know how many partners you've got now in your business, of partners you are dealing with at the same time.
Yeah, we have currently in between customers and partners, probably some 120.
It's probably some 120. So, and if we image a company, for instance, which has, I always give an example of SGS. I was speaking with them and they say, we've got 500,000 customers.
But that's because you have business to business, but actually more likely business to consumer. And in this case, is business to business.
That's quite big business they got, but this is the thing, they got quite big customer base.
Yeah, as well. I mean, in our case, the customers are the top mining companies in the world.
Yes.
The top, I mean, in Latin America, you have copper, you have zinc, you have silver, gold. So these are the biggest international mining companies for this company. And then you also have, in our business, we have concessions, oil concessions, oil concessions as well in the country. And we operate the metro line, the subway in the country as well. And so these are the different kind of businesses, and each line of business has different exposure, and so on. So how we do? Let me share a slide on the if you can allow me to share one slide would be good.
Just
screen.
Give me a sec. I will find how to do that. I will make you
share
host.
Screen. Yeah.
And then you will make me host back.
Yeah. If I find how to do it.
I believe so. Otherwise,
yeah. Okay, good. Let me share this slide with you. You tell me when you see it, please.
I see it. I see it. Yeah. You may also. Yeah, it's already good. Yeah.
Good. So actually, this is the process that we follow for our due diligence, where we have two set of questions. Actually, the questions we have here for the people inside our company and for the company, I mean the customer, which is the third party, each of the questions, they point out to a crime typology. You could say to a compliance risk.
Yes.
So in my internal questionnaire, I am asking from where do you know this customer? How you get to get into the details of a potential business? Are you in line with the profit margins typical for this kind of businesses? So on. And on the external questionnaire, actually what you are gathering is information related to the name of the management, of the officials for that company, on the name of the beneficiary owners, on the name of the main customers, main suppliers, and so on. Why? Because in the middle, I am asking or looking for three kind of group risks: geography risk, third-party risk, and the business risk. So it is different to ask for a partner who is in Libya or who is in Switzerland.
Absolutely.
You may measure different risks. The third party itself, if you have a company which is quite cumbersome, quite complicated in their business structure with several holdings, offshore companies, and so on, is different to one-shot holding company, which makes sense with the size of the business they have. And on the other hand, is the kind of business they are. If they are in a business primarily with government or primarily with private industry, it will provide you with a different profile of risk.
Sure.
So all the questions I ask internal to the commercial manager or to the credit manager who is looking for the business and to the company are looking for crime typologies, alerts, risks. I get all that information and I have a preliminary assessment on this. And what I do is I put all the information in a search tool. We use a tool which is quite one of the best in the world, SecurityMate by Steele. where it is the typical name search lists, sanctions, politically exposed people, the PEPs, and so on. So you screen all that, and then you go into different tools in order to make sense of the alerts that you receive, in order to dump those ones who are what we call the false positives, and keep the ones that provide you certain sense of risk. So what you have at the end, it is a sort of a report of alerts. I'm not talking about risk. I'm just talking about alerts that we have identified during our research, during our analysis. And then what we do is we translate those alerts into risks. Okay. Because risks is the common talk with the business. I shouldn't talk to you about an alert. I see an alert on this and that. No, I'm talking about the risk on corruption because of this guy is being said to do this, that, and that. So it's more tangible to you, and then you can see as a specialist on the credit side whether or not that poses a risk on your business and to what degree, in order to tell whether or not, and I come back the three decisions I have to say, either I absorb the risk, either I mitigate the risk, and in the mitigation could be the transfer of the risk, or either I reject the risk. And that is the final conclusion. If I accept the risk, actually what I'm doing with the business as a compliance, chief risk and compliance, I am signing an agreement with the business that these are the steps that the business will have to implement in order to mitigate the risks that we have identified in this process. And we will come regularly to monitor that those measures that we have agreed with the general manager are in place. For me, this is what is acceptable. It doesn't mean that after this process, I have zero risk left. It means that I have done my due diligence. It means that I have put the effort necessary to the level of risk that this third party is taking or is providing us. And I have commensurate decision, a sensible decision to the level of risk that I have identified and taken.
Well, it comes back again. Whatever analysis is done, this is supposed to lead to the decision, and actually the decision is key. And absolutely agree with you. The biggest problem to me, which I've seen in many cases with the credit risk and with credit risk, with compliance risk, with many other risks, is that the problem is not analysis. The real problem is actually decision, because what we decide in the end. Fernando, can you please go to this bottom, which is called participants, then find me, then make a right click and make me host back. There is a
okay, participants.
You see Andrei Sichka, then you got like the bottom called more. I know, and then or you just do right click and
make host.
Yeah, make host. Yeah. Thank you. So it's all about looking at flags, then taking decisions. And what I found with the credit risk, especially when we take when we take the methodologies taken from the banking system. So when we define credit risk as a default probability, it has no connection with the size. especially when we transfer that practice to accounts receivable. And then it becomes actually unseen. So people don't see exposure of credit risk, even with the credit risk, which is quite simple. And to me, the same story, or more or less the same story with the compliance risk. So if we take a compliance risk, yeah, we're supposed to know what are the benefits on other side, because it's quite unwise to take high risk having low reward.
Yeah.
And to me, the problem, and when it comes up to the decision makers who normally love simple solutions, simple decisions, obvious decisions, because they believe everything is simple, if the real risk is unseen or is not clear, is not reflected in, let's say, reflected in money, it becomes unseen. So as long as we speak about kind of, probabilities, something like that. I'll give you a simple example from credit risk. Once I was asked, Andre, can we give this company a credit? I said, no. Why? Because their default probability is 10%. Every credit analyst would say 10% is high. Then sales director said, 90% probability that customer gonna pay is enough to me. It's just enough to me. And on his understanding, he was right. That's why I actually developed a methodology which shows the credit risk in my actual credit worthiness is money. So in that case, we can say we have to put $1 million under risk, which will be either paid or not, or which we can lose every single moment of time, because we don't know when, because we don't have crystal ball. And even if we have one, there is no surety it will tell us the truth. But at the same time, we risk $1 million, and what we got in the end, what benefits we have. If the benefit is $3 million, it's one story. But if the benefit is $1,000, is another story.
There is a third outcome of that story.
Yeah.
Because you can have a huge reward at the end for the project.
If you survived to the end.
Because the risk you are facing, the probability is very tiny.
Yes.
But the impact is catastrophic.
Absolutely.
So those catastrophic risks are quite linked to your reputation.
Yes.
So typically you are saying, okay, fine, this is just bad press for this company. No one can ensure that this really happened. I have the doubt that the legal system has already put this on trial or started investigations, but I have the noise on the press about this guy. There
Absolutely.
it comes. There it comes, the measurement of the specialist of your business in that customer business. And that is subjective. Absolutely. But in that subjectivity is where the biggest decisions in the boardroom takes place as well. Yeah. Because then, yes, I mean, on the number side, you can have certainty in many things. But on the business side, on the decisions, on the evolution in the future, you have quite a lot of uncertainty. And that is the gray hair of the board that will prevail. And in that sense, the appetite for reading or not the alerts and the translation on risks of what you found, the appetite that has the board is what will dictate you how much compliance risk you take. And the role of the compliance officer will be to coach, to open the eyes to that board on how critical is this decision or that decision for the future of the company and whether or not you want to face a catastrophic risk. And when I say catastrophic risk, if you're a bank, what is your catastrophic risk? Become part of the sanction list of the pack.
I mean, sanction could be, I mean, in case of compliance risk, it's not only sanction. You can go to jail for the rest of your days. And I mean, and there are other things. That's why I say, you know, exposure of potential exposure, that's where we started, and that's where we are coming to the end. Exposure of compliance risk could be enormous. I mean, sometimes the imagination of us might be too poor to see these risks. You know, too many people I know, I've seen in 90s in Ukraine, they say, if I would even imagine, being able to imagine that this, you know, things can go this bad, I would never start that. So this is why we have risk management. This is why we have actually specialists. And thanks for mentioning that. Even with credit risk, even with calculation, you know, one of the best advisors I had in my professional life was from Joe Pimbley, who said, success of a credit is not correlated with the quality of credit risk models and even qualifications of analysts. No. The only correlation success, credit success has is the correlation between credit granting and understanding of counterparts' business. So the deeper you understand that business of your counterpart, the business you finance or the business you sell to, or your business you just deal with or you buy from, the more chances you got to make these operations or these cooperation successful.
Absolutely.
That's the thing. And the deeper you know that, the more chances you can avoid or at least imagine precisely with the precision which is technically possible the consequences of compliance risk. Because otherwise, I don't know, you are trying to run within the forest, you know, with being blinded. You know, if you got just, you know, relying on your good luck is a good breakfast.
I mean, the tools are tools.
Yeah.
And I still believe, and day after day, I become more convinced that yes, these are just things that can help you, but
absolutely,
your knowledge about the core of that business where you want to step in doing business is key for making you aware of the risks that that counterpart can bring to you, and then start. It's just the start to make the good questions to assess whether or not you can trust what you have more cherished to you, which is your core business, your company.
That's what I, you know, I'm delivering a course in credit management, and when it comes to credit decisions, and I think it is here we got lots of similarity, because either credit granting or signing a contract with a counterpart, you know, whatever assessment tools we use, whatever their quality, in the end of the day, we're supposed to trust money to a customer, just sign a contract, or actually we go to future which is not yet defined.
Mm-hmm.
We don't know what happened in the future, and we both agreed that, you know, there is, I mean, there is a crystal ball, but it is unable to predict that future. So nobody knows the future, but when we sign contract or when we trust money to a customer or to a supplier, we take these consequences. And this is the step which is unavoidable. We're supposed to, one day we're supposed to either step forward or refuse it. There is no gray area. There is no gray area, and this is the decision. And
absolutely,
this is the decision.
you need to take measured risk. I mean, there is no business in the world like Snow White. I mean, Snow Whites only are in fairy tales.
Absolutely.
Every business has a dark zone, a bad thing that happened in the past, and so on. So
in Russian, we say every business has its own skeleton in the wardrobe.
Yeah. So would you do business with a company that has delinquished in the past? I would say yes, provided that.
Absolutely.
And then suspensive point, because provided that, and then you have a lot of precautions you need to take.
Sure.
But if the company has changed 180 degrees or 90 degrees, you are on the line potentially to do business. Otherwise, you wouldn't do business with many of the top companies in the world.
Yeah, it's one of the interesting, just to say an anecdote in return. I always smile when I hear that so much from financial tech companies who help compliance managers with the check and everything. Then they say one of the red flags is a mass registration address. And it just reminded me, and that I always said, okay, when I hear that, I always say one of the worst place in the world, if we follow this rule. In Ukraine, there is a business center where where GTI was registered. And this is, I mean, there were like, I don't know, maybe 100 different entities there, but majority of them are GTI and GT International, Philip Morris International, ING Bank, Mars, and so on and so on and so on. So put them all into the blacklist, please, because this is past registration. So the thing is, even with the quite serious exposure of compliance, we're supposed to stay on the common sense side. Not on safe, not on dark side, but really on the common sense side. It's always like this. Fernando, thank you very much. We actually covered our program. Ladies and gentlemen, maybe if you have questions, it's just the right time for them. Please put them into chat or just join us via the voice. I look forward to it. And while people are thinking about where question, maybe if I'm allowed to ask one more question from my side.
Please go ahead.
We've covered today all the we actually, it was quite interesting discussion because we were speaking about very high strategic level, but when we come back to processes, I like the analytical approach you have, but if we come back to the example where, let's say, company has several thousands of customers, what would be your suggestion? What are the, let's say, most let's say process-wise practices like AML, KYC, sanction list, something like that, which are more or less either automated or more or less standard?
Yeah, I would say that actually all that you mentioned are linked. And I mean, because for the anti-money laundering program, part of the backbone is having a very structured process of KYC.
Yes.
And then the key part of the KYC is the due diligence portion. And in order to do that due diligence portion appropriately, it is not necessarily the duty of the compliance function to do the due diligence. It is actually the business function that knows that customer that has to do the due diligence because they have the knowledge, they know the risks, they understand that business. Compliance will provide the tools, will provide the methodology, and so on. So if I have to mention one of the elements in a standard compliance program that provides the best visibility on risks, I would say is the due diligence, provided it is done by the experts in the business.
Okay, so quite clear. Thank you very much. So there are already processes which we just could like, or we might not like them, but we're supposed to implement. And last question from my side, maybe, if we put that much trust into business side, we put them into the potential conflict of interests. Meaning that we believe, or I continue to believe, that decision is to be taken looking at by look at both sides of the transaction, the risk and the benefit. And have you maybe faced cases where risks, I mean, I'm not talking about compliance risk. On credit side, I see that so many times when people say so many funny things like there is no credit risk because customer paid 2 last invoices on time. That's quite funny. But we might give them, we may give people a methodology, but then the assessment, the conclusion of assessment supposed to be stay with a neutral party. So they collect information, but final conclusion about the risk supposed to be done by, I would say, relatively neutral specialist who simply says the risks are this, and that, and then we take decision. If I understood, do I understand correctly about that?
Yeah, I mean, you would have as part of the methodology an evaluation of the assessment that the specialist is doing. I mean, if it is taken the necessary methodological steps, but you will not necessarily identify immediately if there is a conflict of interest in putting forward for that business. That's true. Nevertheless, you have other tools in the system, in the compliance system, like the whistleblower or other kind of tools that will provide you feedback when things go wrong, and then you will identify those issues. I mean, how to prevent the conflict of interest risk is actually through awareness, through training on those elements, and also screening, because when you do the screening of your employees and you ask the good questions, you will get a profile on where there can be some conflicts and where they can be. And as a matter of fact, our company does a sort of a declaration of common interests for the key employees on a yearly basis, where we analyze those potential conflict of interest risks that come not only on the business side, on the credit side, but also on the supervision. Because you could have someone below you that is in conflict with you because of family reasons, for instance, or financial interests. And then it is, unless you ask the question from that perspective, you will not realize in the due diligence. You will realize when things go wrong and someone says, you know, this business was closed because he knew or he's in love with that person that brought this business, and then he was biased on this analysis and so on, and you realize with a fait accompli. So it is it is a tricky part, but then on the failures that you have in order to prevent conflict of interest, you will learn and you will put more protective elements for your acts in the due diligence in the future.
Yeah. So if we, I mean, that's not forgivable too much, but where there is always, you know, a seduction to generalize, you know, experience in the same direction, you know, trying to do things right brings a lot.
It does.
Fernando,
the key features of the boardroom.
Absolutely. Experience of the boardroom, experience of decision makers, because you know, you can learn only by your own experience.
Sometimes the devil knows more because of the age than being the devil.
Absolutely, you know, but at the same time, you know, let's still believe that there is a God who created sun out of the spike.
Absolutely.
So you just, you know, he taken, I don't know, this legend when it's not spike, spider. So they decided the devil and the god had a dispute who can create most beautiful thing, and the devil went to his hellsmith trying to create something. At the same time, God created in 1 second. He took a spider and created the sun. So the devil was disgraced. So that's, I mean, I believe we got this legend to say that if there is something wrong, or if this wrong could be good, but it doesn't have unlimited power. So there is always a positive side of that. And I do thank you, Fernando, very, very much for today's discussion. It was a lot of information, and I will still think deeply, and I will watch our discussion today. Thanks God it is recorded. And thank you very much for enlarging my experience and our experience and our understanding of compliance. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much to everyone who will be watching it in record, who found, and special thanks to everyone who participated in today's air. Please continue to ask your questions in chats. Find us on social media, and I just remind you that credit engineering has a policy of not leaving unanswered questions. So ask questions, I guarantee you an answer. Please have big sales, low losses, which in French could be said, bon crédit. Thank you very much, Fernando.
A pleasure. Thanks to everybody for attending this.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
See you next time.
See you. Bye.